Hello, hello. How we doing? Simple Sam, it's really like Batman and Bruce Wayne, like going from Hey Mr. Booze all the way
Hello,
to
hello.
how we do going all the way from Hey Mr. Booze to Simple Sam. I like it. All right. Now let's just see if we're all in focus. It seems like we might not be in focus, but there we go. All right. We're better. All right. So how's everybody doing? We good? Raytech, Alum, nice to have you all. So the first thing that I wanted to address while people are coming in is Raytech actually had a question. And Raytech, you can go ahead and ask the question, but I'll paraphrase it. Basically, you want to know if gain staging is important in the digital world. Is that correct? Dean Paul, how you doing? Yeah, so is gain staging important in the digital world? Yes and no. Um, Reason being, there's a couple things to consider. DAWs were, I mean, when you're dealing with signal flow in the non-digital world, there's definitely a sweet spot that things, if you push a signal through um, a certain piece of gear, it's going to really start to, I guess the best way you would say is it starts to warm up at a certain place. And then the signal, if it goes too far, it starts to deteriorate. And if it doesn't go far enough, it never really starts to warm up. Now, digital stuff is very different in that clipping is very different. Digital clipping is obviously way more problematic than analog clipping, but at the same time, the way that stuff is processed is also different. But what I would say is that you have to keep in mind that a lot of the stuff that is being built for the digital world is originally modeled, at least theoretically modeled, not necessarily like it's not like a EQ8 is modeling a specific console, but when the digital world came about, they were trying to draw in people that were familiar with the analog environment. Now, something else you can look at here, for example, let me just take this channel fader. And one thing about gain staging is, if I can switch the camera real quick. I forgot to load this up. You probably won't be able to. I'll pull up the desktop on the. Let's do this one here. All right. So look at these channel faders. Obviously, if you look down here, you have, it's a logarithmic increase and decrease. So once you get down here, going up 6 dB or moving in 6 dB increments is a lot less detailed than once you get around unity. So Ableton is different than other DAWs. Some DAWs will go up to plus 10 dB. I think Logic does. I think Pro Tools does. And that's why if you ever have a any kind of MIDI controller and you're using it with Ableton, you'll notice that the MIDI fader doesn't line up at Unity like in Ableton like it would in Logic or something like that. But you have a lot more wiggle room right here between the plus and minus 6 here versus if you're all out of whack, you start losing detail. So that's one thing about gain staging that is valuable. Another thing is that, yeah, so if I pull up something like this SSL channel strip, the SSLG channel strip 4000G, this is designed to emulate as good as possible a SSL channel strip in the analog world. So once you start ignoring gain staging, this is going to treat it's going to give you the analog consequences of ignoring gain staging. So, and I would say until very recently, the analog modeling stuff was just a bunch of junk. It basically just added noise to the signal, and then there was like an analog button on, for example, all the Waves plugins. They would have this analog button, and all it would literally do is just add a bunch of white noise. So, yeah, the big thing is that there definitely is a sweet spot, and learning that sweet spot is going to be different with every plugin. It's going to be different with every DAW, and so what I would do, and this isn't going to be the answer that you'd like, gain staging is never going to hurt you. There are times where it will even help you. If you're clipping, you're going to have a lot of problems. If the gain staging is super out of whack, you can paint yourself into a corner because then you have to start compensating in areas that you don't want to. So, for example, I was talking in the last session that you have, if you've got a compressor running, you don't want to start having to mess with the gain before the compressor because that's already set. You've already dialed in your compressor settings. And so basically the only things left after that are you would have to add another plugin. And in general, adding other plugins can always introduce things like aliasing and phasing and stuff like this. So the more simple you can have it, the better, and it's going to be a lot easier to manage if you start out gain staging. Does that make sense? Does that help your question? And full disclosure, I am not the most conscientious about gain staging either. So a lot of times I need to listen to my own advice. But if there's one thing, if you're like, you know what, I'm super undisciplined with monitoring my levels and just tell me one thing to do, I would say monitor when stuff is going out, monitor here, right? And make sure that is not buried in the red. But other than that, I mean, I would probably bring down the overall volume of all of this. And we've got, so right here I've got the, I'd bring down the volume here. Let's bring boom, boom. Let's bring that down 3 dB, and let's bring this up 3 dB. Yeah, just very basic stuff. So does that answer the question? I always put a plus 6 dB utility gain on master channel. It helps a lot to get the 6 dB mix down. Is that okay? I didn't find a con about using it. Alan, what I would always suggest doing, and this is a challenge, and this is something that I wish that I've suggested to Ableton that you would have an absolute volume fader and a relative volume fader. In that, I would like to be able to automate the volume faders with the motorized faders that I'm having, but also lower the overall volume. What you could do if you automate faders in your tracks. So say, let's just go here. Obviously, we're not going to keep that. But then, so say you automate the faders here, and then you get to the end of the track, and things are all pumped up on the master channel, and you're having to bring it down to lower the levels. Then you would be better off going in. You could take a utility plug-in if you wanted to drop something. If you wanted to drop everything 6 dB, then you could do, and now I'm breaking my own rules of this, but let's say you drop that, let's drop it 5 dB. Then you could copy and you could just paste that across the board. And yeah, I'm not going to bore you with doing it all the way across, but you get the idea of what I'm doing. So now I got to undo all this. Let's undo that. There we go. And but Alum, actually your thing of doing, so what you're saying is you put a plus 6 dB utility gain on the master channel, and then at the end you turn that off. Is that what I'm hearing? Because that's actually that's a pretty interesting idea, especially if you're not using any processing on the master bus. Something else that I would say about that is if you're processing on the master bus, I would just avoid it. Reason being is that, you know, if the highs are too bright in your track, go to the source. That's the luxury of mastering engineers. Can't go to the source with that stuff. They're stuck with the stems, or they're stuck with a single stereo file, and so they're having to EQ the master channel effectively. But if you can lower the hi-hats or lower whatever's causing your ears to scream a little bit, then why not do that? Yeah. So I will use the master channel for, I think I might have shown you this. So if a track's really busy, sometimes you have trouble figuring out where that sound is coming from. So if you go, let's just take here. So I would take that, I would cut that out of the master channel, and then I think we've got a little bass line here that's where we're going to find that resonance, and then we can notch that out. Any other questions? Let me see if there's any Instagram questions that came in. Big kicks, how? We already talked about this in the last session. If you're going to use reverb on kicks, run it in mono. Creating it in stereo might create a lot of hype in the studio in a closed environment, but it's going to be really muddy and very weak sounding once you get it on a big sound system. So Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? In my first session, when I discussed LFO. Yes. What about? On the auto filter, right? Yeah, so there's an Ableton Live LFO that shows the waveform in motion. It's under the audio effect for those who didn't know. Yes, I'm still reluctant because it's a Max for Live plugin. And historically, Max for Live has always lost the mappings on everything. And so it's a real pain to do it if it loses the mapping. But has anybody had any problems with in version 11 with the losing the mapping? Because if not, I'll start using that. Because I find it a lot more intuitive than the LFO on the auto filter. Any tips for processing drum groups like big red flags to pay attention when starting a mix? I would never say red flags because there's always things that I tend to avoid doing that I tend to avoid doing that I'll break my own rules down the road. So one thing I would say is in the drum groups, like don't take advantage of the panning, and what I would say with panning for certain things, like the sounds that really are providing any kind of punch and groove, those type of sounds I usually keep down the center. But anything else, I will tend to, when I'm doing the mix down, I'll tend to pan those as much as I can just to free up as much space down the center as I can. Something though that, like, you've got this, let's get the hi-hat here. So it's a high-end frequency, but there's still that tact that's coming in, and you don't want to, if you start panning it starts sounding a little bit weird. So what you can do is you could pull up an EQ8 and go in here, go to the mode, and go to the left right. And so we'll be, okay, let's get this. And then we'll go switch over to the right side. And the reason I'm doing this is because then you still have elements. You get some of the panning effect out of it, but you still have elements in both sides, both on the right and left channel. And it gives you, it creates a little bit of space in down the middle with it. So, and if you want to, you can actually use this as almost a panning utility, because, for example, you could take this over. Let's keep that here. And then we'll do this here. And then paste it. And then what you can do is you could actually take the scale here and you can inverse it. So now you've got a closed hi-hat and a shaker that are panned in opposite direction. So Yeah. That's definitely something that I do. So that because otherwise you start to have, yeah, in the mono stereo also, or mid stereo, or mid side, I guess it would be. That's also valuable. John Selway, how you doing? I enjoyed the Saturday morning viewing or whatever. I guess it was Saturday afternoon for me. You're waking up early to do those sessions. What other questions we got? But Alan, as something I want to say is textbook understanding of stuff will only get you so far, and I can't tell you how many times I've sat down with somebody whose records I just absolutely love, and I think their productions are genius, and then you get a chance to see the sessions or whatever, and they would be the things that would break all the rules of every YouTube tutorial there is, you know? If you look at, for example, someone like Joey Beltram is a great example. If you pull up Joey Beltram's waveform and you ran it through the rubric of how good this waveform is looking and how correct it is, through the lens of what a YouTube tutorial tells you what to do, he would get an F, you know? But those tracks, somehow they always sound super, super good. And it wasn't just his old tracks, his new tracks, they always just were so loud and so maxed out on the if you just looked at the waveform. But they still had they still hit really good. They hold up against all the other tracks and everything. So don't paint yourself into a corner with so many rules that it takes the life out of the process, right? That's something I think maybe it was, John, was it you that was talking about this, or somebody was, and I really agreed with it, where you kind of go through 3 phases. The first phase of production is, I don't know anything, but this is really fun and I want to run with it. The second phase is looking back on your first phase in horror, that you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how I let myself do this, or put 3 reverbs on the same channel, or whatever it was. And then you start like educating yourself you start educating the fun out of the process. And then the third phase is kind of taking that technical knowledge that you know and allowing yourself to not be always restrained by that technical knowledge, and being okay again with doing things that are not conventional and things that you taught yourself not to do. I would say the time that my music was the absolute worst music that I ever made was when my technical understanding was growing, and my playfulness, or my like naivety as a producer, was declining, and you become kind of this awkward teenager musically. And I just think it's really important to always, I also want to say, I think it's also important to not say, well, I don't care about any of that. I just want to do that. You should care about stuff. You should care about music theory, and you should care about learning how to use the gear you have better. But man, that's not going to write you good tracks. It won't write good tracks for you. And I think that going back, sometimes I go back and try to pull up old sessions if the VST gods and the software gods are friendly to me. I'll pull up old sessions of mine because I'm like, I don't know how I did that. And then I pull it up and it's like I've got 3 grain delays and some gate that I don't know how I'm using it or anything like this. And so over engineering. Exactly. But it's good to know the tools, but it's nice to not be governed by them. I don't regret making music where things were completely out of tune with each other, just because I didn't know any better, and I didn't have a room that was acoustically sound enough to tell me otherwise. So, there's some things that you can take with you, but the key is to always, the most important thing is to create environments where you're having fun, and then everything else can be fixed. Ideally, not always. I just sent off a track for this compilation to mastering, and I got it back. And this is going to be, I think, most people's battles, but I got it back, and I did like 5 mix downs, finally said, oh, this is the one, get the mastering back. And I'm like, oh, I don't like this. And it's not because of the mastering. It's totally because of my mix down. And don't rely on mastering to fix problems, because it won't. I don't think I've ever had an issue in a track fixed by the mastering. Usually it's just that I've had enough distance, like 1 or 2 weeks away from the track, and then I can step back and evaluate the track with a more clear head, or maybe a more critical eye. And I hear things that I would have done differently. But you also have to say, at some point, just put your foot down and the track's done, and move on. When I'm doing some one-on-one stuff with people, sometimes we get to a place in a track where I say, I think it's better to start something new now, because your production level is so much higher than it was whenever you started this track, that it can be hard to detach from something emotionally. But just trust that every new project you start will continue at least on a technical level to get better than your old stuff. So, I'm just going to start messing with this and ask questions as they come along. And oh, I need to share this session with all of you. NDS, where are you based out of? I don't recognize the username. Steven, how you doing? Or Stefan? Let me get this Dropbox link pulled up. I think that does everybody have access to the Dropbox folder? It should be the same. Oh, there's my Dropbox decided to start cooperating with me. Someday I'm going to post the completely wrong thing. So now that we've got something basic, I'm just going to start playing around with stuff, and as questions come up, then feel free to ask. And this is where tracks become something completely different than what I initially planned them to be. So let's do it. Up a little bit. This is how most of my techno goes, you know. It's start out with something a little bit more floaty and melodic, and then reduce everything to one note, technofy it, and then it's off to the races. So that link works, and it has all the sessions in it. All right, I'm kind of liking this little tail of it. So on this, I'm gonna actually switch it over to. I'm gonna at least do the bass mono here, and we'll see what's happening. This is something that's really tricky, and I always say headphones 90% of the time are better, 100% better than an untreated room, unless you get lucky with that room acoustics. But there's certain things you need to be aware of that aren't gonna translate, and one of them is the way that reverb and other stereo-based effects behave. So a lot of times you put reverb on a bass or on a kick, and it just sounds absolutely colossal in headphones. But what's happening is you're sending out you're processing low end signals in two very different ways on each the right and left channels. And then when those things come together, because your right headphone ear can't cancel out frequencies in your left headphone ear. That's something, there's some room emulation stuff. I haven't seen anything that really behaves in that way, that actually gives you an authentic experience. Raytech, it's not all that bad. I mean, and the thing about headphones is, I mean, you have to get really expensive and good preamps and everything to get a really accurate response. But one thing about headphones is that there's no places where there's complete dead zones in the frequency range. So, yeah. So now we're going to reduce this. Michael, but does it give you the vibe in that it sends part of your, if something's panned hard right, it still gives you something over in your left ear, but does it really do things like, oh, well, you're sending these frequencies out of the right speaker and these frequencies out of the left speaker, so they're going to cancel each other out. See, that's the I think that you can create stereo imaging with these emulation plugins, but I don't think you can really understand the problem areas. For example, I have this sub pack thing. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. And when you put that sub pack on, it's like the most exciting thing ever. The problem is that you put that thing on and you're gonna think that every kick and bass line is the dopest thing ever. And that's pretty far from the truth. Let's get a drum bus on here. Group it, do what we did this last time, create a chain there. So we're not gonna keep this clap like this. Make it a little less harsh there. Any questions? I'll stop exactly where I'm at and answer any questions that people would have. Dive in, Steven. Let's find some vocal stuff. Good enough. Because we're not doing anything super strange with this. At what frequency do I make the mono, bass mono? I kind of season it to taste. I would tend to get it up above where the kick is really punching. Because at the end of the day, think about subwoofers and the roll off cutoff frequency of subwoofers. A lot of times you're doing like 120 down on subs, and then so the speakers that they're coming out of are going to go mono anyway down below that frequency. Does every track have to be mono compatible? No. I don't think so, but I think that you have to see. Techno music's different because this stuff is built for nightclubs. It's not built for Spotify. It's not built for earbuds even, and the things that you would in a normal production environment you would have to consider, like when Taylor Swift is making an album, she has to assume, and if you talk to mix engineers that are doing more commercial stuff that's made for airtime on Spotify and radio, keep in mind, most people are consuming music on their laptop speakers. They're consuming music on their phone loudspeaker or on one of those Jambox Pros. So on that, you would definitely want that to be mono compatible, because even in a world where you have two stereo channels on a boombox that's like this iPhone is stereo technically, but the speakers are also 3 inches apart. So yeah, you would want to consider that with the types of music that are meant to be consumed like that. But at the same time, you have techno music which is not being consumed in that format, or that's not the point of it. So some people they mix in mono. I don't know, for those who are wondering what that is, you would take a utility plug-in here. Where are we? Audio effects. Go to utility, and then you would just mono. You want to make sure you turn this off before you would render it. But mixing in mono means that you can get the levels right a lot easier, and get a nice level mix. Some say, others say they hate it. So, but it's a nice little cross reference where you could just have make sure that the mono is keeping the volume the same. That's mono on. Yeah. So some people would say that you can get the levels a lot tighter by mixing in mono. There's also some people that are there's what do they call it? Left, right, center. There's some acronym LCR or something like this mixing style where there's some people that actually mix and they say if it's not dead center, then it's hard right or it's hard left. And some people swear by that. Some people absolutely hate it. So that's not how I mix. I pan to taste, and I don't mix in mono. But if there's ever a time where my studio acoustics, they have something to be desired, because the room dimensions are. I've got all the acoustic treatment and everything, and it's placed correctly, but the room dimensions are irreconcilably bad, and you can't fix room dimensions. So when there's a real confusing mix, switching on the mono can help a lot with that. Another thing, if you've got a sub in your studio, it's kind of counterintuitive maybe, but I turn off my sub when I'm mixing, and I keep the volume down as low as possible when I'm mixing. So, yeah. Let's pitch this down. So I've got just a grain delay on here, and I pitch down the vocal because it's techno, you know. Play along with the release. No, not mid-side. Left, right, center. I think like Chris Lord Algie, he's really a big advocate of this. Insert time, and I'm gonna actually just drag out this track. Insert silence. Okay. Maybe we'll shorten this a little bit. Double Dutch carpal tape, double Dutch darky cape V12. How you doing? What's your issue with Ableton 10? Let me see if there's something that we can do to help you out. We're just going to run through all
Forever, you got it forever.
So something that I would do then from here is then I would take a audio track here. Levi, how you doing? Something I'd do, I'd then record into this. And you can just basically start resampling yourself, right? Because this isn't where I want it to necessarily be, but I know that if I keep diving in and keep redoing it and reworking it and processing it and doing this, eventually you're going to get some results, right? And because something that made me start doing this type of stuff is I started realizing that when I'm working on a remix, I have a lot more playful of an approach with other people's parts that didn't come out the best. I have a lot more of freedom when there's remix parts that people send me because I don't have any kind of a personal attachment to that. So, yeah, and I realized that when part of it was that they were converted all to audio stems. And so if you didn't necessarily like part of that stem, the only way to deal with that was to mangle it. You couldn't deal with the MIDI notation. You couldn't deal with the source material. You had to actually dive in and create something from what you had to work with. So and what you would do if you wanted to basically sample yourself, you could then go in to create a new audio track, and then you've got 130 Jane, which is the vocal sample. I'm pulling audio from that, and then you would do the monitor in, and you would record arm that, and then all right, now I'll mute that, and I can always revisit that. And then we can start playing around with this. Process it a little bit more. Let's try doing a little bit of delay on it. And let's take this out of sync. Let's bring it to time. So let's copy this over. Something else, if you find yourself, if you want to add life to something and you keep adding reverb onto stuff, and then once you get to the end of a project, you realize that everything's starting to get muddy, then consider using a delay bring down the milliseconds between the delay or the intervals of the delay down to, like, I've got this at 45 milliseconds. And you kind of get a little bit of a reverb effect, and it doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't take up the same sonic, it doesn't have that sonic footprint that clouds the mix as quickly. So yeah, consider that in the place of using a reverb. Just my 2 cents. Let's go here. So what I did is I resampled this with the delay on it. It's this vocal chop, and resampled it, and now I've transposed. I've got clip automation, so you can go into here, automate the clip, and I've got the transposition here, so it's pitching it up in these intervals. So it's at I've pitched it up 3 steps, and then it's in its basic, it's at its regular state the rest of the time. And you can create these kind of rhythms just by pitching up parts of an audio clip. You could also automate volume stuff. So but yeah. And a lot of the stuff that you can do in the clip mode is you have a lot more control over stuff in the clip mode than you would by throwing different effects that kind of do the same thing on it. So let's see. Thank you, Double Dutch. I've got a Roland TR8 and a TB3 with the Behringer UMC 40 4HD audio interface. Hopefully getting a Korg mini log. Wanted to hear your opinion on my situation. Okay. So, Double Dutch, it sounds like you're kind of overwhelmed with Live 10, and it's not connecting with you, which is fine. I mean, everybody learns different, and some people are much more hands-on, where they like having hardware in front of them, and looking at a computer screen doesn't make sense. That's totally fine. One thing that I see in your situation, though, and I can only this is just speculation, but it sounds like maybe something's not connecting, and so you try to add something that maybe you can connect with. And what I'd encourage you to do is simplify it. And it doesn't mean you need to sell what you have or anything, but for example, that Roland TR8, you can make a full track on that Roland TR8 with nothing else. See if you can do that. If you're connecting, find the piece of whatever you have, whether it's Live 10 or whether it's the Roland TR8 or whether it's the TB3. Find that piece of gear that you connect with best right now. Maybe it's a combination of Ableton and the TR8 or something like this. And take that TR8 with Ableton, if that's the piece that you connect with, and then pretend like that it's like you on a desert island, and you've got, I don't know why you would produce music instead of looking for food or water if you were stranded on a desert island, but let's pretend like you were. take that and say, these are the only two ways that I have to express myself musically, and make that happen. And so what you're going to do, take that TR8 and hit record on live. And just to clarify, I don't want to insult any intelligence or anything, but some people just don't know how to do that. You're going to have your audio interface is going to have audio from, and then you'll have extension in, and then you've got all of these different channels depending on your audio interface. So whatever you've got the TR8 plugged into on your audio interface, you're going to select that channel, and then you're going to be able to just hit record and take that audio, and then whatever audio you have after like 15 or 20 minutes, then start chopping that stuff up. You know, just jam, just enjoy the process, and then go back and revisit stuff and chop it up and try to make it into sensical parts. So, dot initial, smash that like button. Good to see you. Awesome. So yeah, that's what I'd Double Dutch. It sounds like you've got everything that you need to create, and you've got different ways to interface with the stuff that you're creating. And like I said, I'm just using Ableton because it's something that everybody has access to for at least 90 days, and yeah, I want it to be accessible to everybody. So, yeah, any other questions? I'll happily answer those. But yeah, so I've got this audio clip, and then I've added some delay that adds a little bit more of like a reverb effect than a delay. In this case, Jasper, how you doing? I love your music. Keep it up. Check out JSPR if you get a chance. Released this absolute monster on Second State. Whoo! So nice. So nice. Keep it up. And then you can start playing with this. Another thing you can do with, if you're dealing in audio, is you've got these different ways of preserving you choose what you want to preserve, right? So you've got the beats, you've got tones, you've got texture, all this stuff. And then below that, if you're on beat mode, you can choose the how you want it to. I don't even know how you would describe this, but just listen to what's happening here. So then we're going to take this, instead of going in both directions, we're going to take it and go one direction. So the arrow is just pointing to the right. And then here is kind of like if there was like a one knob ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release function, this would kind of be that. So, but we got the delay on. Let me turn off this delay so you can hear it better. And I'm going to solo this. Hear how it gets all short? And then you can bring it back up. So if you ever have a sample that you really like, but you want to tighten it up, this is one way to do it. And keep in mind, these preservation modes, if you ever want to preserve the quality and keep it as close to the original, then you're going to do Complex Pro. But I kind of bounce between Beats and Complex Pro. If it's like a vocal that I don't want to mangle or anything, it's always Complex Pro. But beats, you can do some really cool mangling of the audio, and so you've got that going. So we'll keep it on beats, and this would allow you, if you've got a sample that has maybe too much decay on it or whatever, you can bring it in with this. But let's turn back on this. And what I want to also do in this is I want to bring up the volume right here. Or what I might have to do, because we're at now, let's bring this up. So now we've got a completely different track that was inspired by this sound from Deep Child. I just basically took the space in between the synth hits. Took the space in between the synth hits, go here, and then I pitched it down an octave. And again, I put the bass mono up. I'll roll it up even a little bit more. And then we had this, which originated in here. We've got this. This was the original. Definitely not a sample that would make sense, but you can always find something in every sound. You can find something out of everything, and you can turn. I would almost say you can turn almost anything into almost anything. So sometimes it's just nice to play with unconventional stuff. Take a sound that you don't like. You know, and I don't want to step on any toes, but EDM, that type of stuff isn't my thing. It's fine if that's your thing. I want everybody to be able to express themselves musically in whatever route they choose. But man, if I see like a EDM DJ's sample library, I grab it, because I know that nobody in the techno purist world would be willing to lower themselves to ever consider using any sound from any of those folders. And yeah, of course. I mean, one of my favorite drum synths for many years was Kick by Nicky Romero. And the funniest part about it is you couldn't get anybody in the techno world to use this drum synth because it had Nicky Romero's name on it. Fast forward, they just changed it to Kick 2, and now people use it till they're blue in the face. So be willing to explore musical arenas and sound palettes that might not at first glance in their original state make any sense for making the type of music that you want to make. But that's for me, that's a gold mine, because you're never going to hear, like there's this Arturia bundle that has the Buchla modular synth in it. You can rest assured that every techno person has that plugin, and they run towards it because modular something, and you've got a sound palette there that's going to be completely used and abused in the first year that it's been out, and you can take one or two steps to the side to a different genre that to us, to techno people, we think that's worlds different. But if you play EDM music to my mom and you play the music that I like to my mom, she would be like, it's the exact same. So let's just humble ourselves a little bit and dive into stuff that maybe we wouldn't be inclined. Messing with the sample library is not the same as buying a concert ticket. Enjoy it. Make something out of something. So, any other questions? I think that we're gonna wrap this up pretty soon. If there's not any questions, but I'll keep this looping and then play around with it. Throw out any other questions that you got. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, any music you're not into all sounds the same within that genre, right? We're going to do a little experiment with the new LFO on Live 11, because we'll see if it maps well. Let's pull that on there. There we go. Bring that down. I went a little fast there. So what I did is I dropped the erosion plugin in, and if you can hear what this is doing. Let me unmap that. So this is basically the y-axis is basically the amount, and that's erosion. And this is the frequency that you're going with. You have to be real careful because it can sound exciting, but it can really start degrading the mix. But play around with this. The erosion plugin's really nice and a kind of undervalued plugin. So one thing that you can do is you've got this. Let me just delete this. Got this LFO here, and originally this stuff was all completely separate. And Max for Live started. I think it was Plugo. No, it was Cycling 73, 72, 73, 73. And then Ableton started slowly getting more and more integrated with Max. Max MSP is the programming language that these plugins were based out of. And then now there's kind of stock plugins in Ableton that are built off of Max MSP, which then became Max for Live. And yeah, so what you can do, for example, here's this LFO. and very visual as to what you're doing. And then let's just bring down the rate of the, if I bring up the rate, then you can see how it's going all crazy there. That's 40 hertz. Let's bring it down. And then the cool part about these LFOs is you can click on map, and then you can click on anything, pretty much anything, and it's gonna apply that to that parameter. So let's put it on width. And now you can see what it's doing with the width. Hey, Marcus Webb. Long-time listener, first-time commenter. Very nice to hear. Thank you, Marcus. Cycling 74 was I? How did I get 72, 73? Man. My max MSP game is off. So, anyways, so you can see how it's kind of expanding and contracting with the width there. And say you could also, let's go ahead and put in another LFO. Can drop this in. Let's map that to the amount. And we'll bring, let's bring down the frequency there, and we'll offset this a little bit so that they're not going on the same wavelength. Now let's see. No, the LFO doesn't matter because the LFO is not dealing with audio. So you can put the LFO wherever you want. So for example, if I click on this and then I go to that, then it's going to affect that. And there you go. But I'm going to put it back on the amount here. But yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, maybe that's going a little bit too much. So let's adjust the depth so it doesn't go too deep into the absolutely dry area. And we'll bring the offset up here so it's so I'm going to save this, and then you all will have this. You'll have access to this Dropbox folder as I put that. I should have put the link to the Dropbox folder. Let me just make double sure. Yep. And okay. Copy Dropbox link. Is a version, and tell me if version 2.4 is on there. Should be. So, okay. As long as there's interest level, I'll keep doing these things because I just it's pretty easy. It makes me actually think about my approach to things. It challenges what I actually know and what I actually don't know about music production. So I mean, I'll keep doing these things as long as there's interest level. I won't sit in a YouTube channel and just talk to myself, but if people are showing up, then I'll do it as long as time permits. Sometimes there might be things that I just have to get done, but yeah, why not? Just be sure that when you're famous that you give me first dibs on all the tracks. So, yeah. And I'll be on Twitch later here in about 1 hour. Gonna eat some dinner, do all that, and be on Twitch. I'm gonna be testing out some Loopmasters sent me a subscription to their whole Loopmasters thing, and I've actually never messed with any of that, and I'm just kind of curious what it is and if it's actually useful or if it's just kind of generic sound libraries. But as you saw here, we used a random vocal sample and you turned it into something that isn't really distinguishable from its origins. So yeah. Cool. Well, you know what to do. And actually, if you haven't subscribed, subscribing would help, because I think that something magic happens if I hit 1,000 subscribers. Like I think I can do streams from my mobile on YouTube if I hit 1,000 subscribers. So go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. And I don't know what I would do from my mobile, but it could be a useful thing once touring starts ramping back up. But yeah. So hopefully see some of you on Twitch. Join the Discord server. We talk about a lot of stuff. There's some production discussion in there, some nonsensical discussion and all that. And